Dr. Maurice Thorne's hand hovered over his notepad. The pen felt too heavy, a magnet pulling him away from the cold reality of his office. His patient, a man named Samuel, was talking about his anxiety, about the feeling that the ground beneath him was always giving way. Suddenly, Samuel's voice became a distant murmur. Dr. Thorne's office, with its aligned books and the soft scent of incense, dissolved into a gray veil. An image arose, clear and terrible, a pair of brown leather boots, the sawless worn. They slipped on the top of a wooden staircase, not the clinic's ornate one, but a more modest one from a house. The dry thud of a fall, silence, and the persistent ringing of a phone, the voice on the other side, ... impossible to hear. The office returned, but the smell of incense now seemed like dust. Thorne's skin was icy. Dr. Maurice Thorne, 52, a psychologist with graying hair and a naturally friendly expression, tried to compose himself. He focused on the voice of Samuel, a 45-year-old civil engineer with a carefully trimmed beard, whose greatest fear was a lack of control. At that moment, Samuel was talking about renovating his house, the things he needed to fix but never found time for. "It's like the universe is conspiring to bring me down," he laughed, a nervous laugh. Dr. Thorne, however, found no humor in it. The premonition had left him with a metallic taste in his mouth. The images weren't just visual. They came with a vivid sensation, the icy terror of an imminent fall. It was as if death was hovering in the office, and Samuel couldn't see it. The room seemed smaller now, the walls closing in. The air was heavier, and the ticking of the clock on the wall, once a comforting presence, had become an unbearable countdown. Thorne leaned forward. "Samuel," he said, in the calmest voice he could muster, "you mentioned the things you need to fix at home. Anything in particular?" Samuel thought for a moment. "Well, the stairs. My wife and we've been putting it off. The handrail is a bit loose. One of those things that becomes invisible after a while, you know?" Thorne's stomach turned. The loose handrail. The wooden floor. The smell of sawdust. It all fit together in a terrifying way. The premonition wasn't a metaphor. It was a literal warning. "You need to fix that, Samuel," Thorne said, his voice becoming more urgent. "Not tomorrow. Today. Hire someone. Do it yourself. But please, do it." Samuel was surprised by his therapist's tone, who was usually so thoughtful. "Dr. Thorne, what ... It's a matter of safety," Maurice interrupted him, his voice firm. "Accidents happen. Small oversights can lead to great tragedies. Don't underestimate the importance of feeling safe in your own home. Don't wait for the universe to conspire in your favor. Do your part." Samuel nodded, still confused by the intensity of the conversation. The session ended shortly after, but Dr. Thorne's words echoed in his head. As he left the clinic, the New York sky was gray. A cold drizzle began to fall, and Samuel felt a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. The seed of doubt, of worry, had been planted, and the feeling that the ground was giving way now was more real than ever. Thorne's attempt to protect Samuel seemed to have worked. Samuel, after leaving the session, was restless. He took the subway back to his apartment in Queens, the noise of the tracks and the shaking of the car serving as a constant echo of his anxiety. The conversation with Dr. Thorne had struck a chord, unearthing a fear he didn't even know he had, the fear of his own negligence. He had always been a I'll-do-it-later kind of man, and the stair renovation was the epitome of his procrastination. When he got home, Samuel's wife, Elaine, noticed his somber expression. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she commented, holding a steaming cup of tea. "I was thinking about the stairs," Samuel said, taking off his damp coat. "Thorne." He was very serious. "I think he scared me." Elaine laughed. "And did you get scared?" "Not in a childish way," Samuel replied, his voice low. "More. Like I was about to do something foolish, and he stopped me just in time." He went up the stairs slowly, the creaking of the wood seeming louder than usual. The handrail, which he had ignored for so long, was indeed loose. He could feel the slight oscillation in his hands. For a moment, the image of Thorne's premonition flashed through his mind. A blur of leather boots and the sound of something breaking. He flinched. The next day, Samuel called a contractor. Mr. Miller, an older man with a white mustache and hands rough from years of work, agreed to come at the end of the week to make the repairs. Samuel felt immense relief. He had outsmarted fate, he thought. Dr. Thorne, with his strange premonition and urgent advice, had given him a second chance. But fate is a stubborn opponent. On Wednesday, Samuel's wife, Elaine, fell ill with a high fever. She was weak and could barely move. Samuel, a man of routine and schedules, was caught off guard. Mr. Miller called to say that the work would have to be postponed. He had a family emergency and could only come next week. Samuel felt a pang of anxiety. He was in the middle of an important work project and couldn't do the work himself. The stairs, with their loose handrail and creaking floor, continued to be a silent threat in the middle of the house. The week dragged on. Elaine recovered slowly, but Samuel was exhausted. Work, worry about his wife, and the silent pressure of the stairs seemed to crush him. He tried to avoid the stairs as much as possible, but they were the only way to the bedroom. Each ascent and descent was an act of balance, a small bet against the universe. He began to see the stairs in his nightmares. The image of boots slipping, the sound of the thud, the phone ringing. He felt the terror that Dr. Thorne had described. One night, Samuel had a particularly vivid dream. He was at the top of the stairs, his hands on the loose handrail. The handrail came completely loose, and he felt the weight of his own body pulling him down. In the dream, the fall was silent, a slow-motion descent into the void. He woke up sweating, his heart pounding in his chest. The darkness of the room seemed to swallow him, and he swore he heard a faint sound of wood creaking coming from downstairs. The next morning, he decided. He couldn't wait for Mr. Miller. He was going to fix the stairs himself. He went downstairs, got his toolbox from the garage, and went up. Elaine, still pale, saw him and asked, "What are you doing?" "Fixing the stairs," Samuel said, with a fierce determination that surprised himself. "I can't wait any longer." He started with the handrail. With a hammer and nails, he fixed it firmly to the wall. He tested it, pulling and pushing, and it didn't move. The relief was so great that he almost cried. He had outsmarted fate once again. He was at the top of the stairs, looking at his work, feeling a sense of victory. He went down, and each step seemed safer, firmer. However, the narrative of death was approaching. Fate, like a patient hunter, was just waiting for the right moment. Samuel focused on fixing the handrail and forgot to inspect the steps. One of the steps, the third from the top, had been damaged for months, but the board was still firmly in place. Samuel, feeling safe, had rushed down, happy to have finally solved the problem. And then he heard the sound. Not the sound of his foot, but of something breaking. The sound was subtle, a low crack, almost inaudible, but to Samuel's ears, it sounded like a balloon popping in a silent room. He stopped abruptly, his foot still in the air, and looked down. A thin, long crack stretched across the third step, right where he had stepped minutes before. The wooden floor now looked like a map of his failure. He felt the ground beneath him give way, not metaphorically, but literally. He climbed back to the top of the stairs, his heart pounding. The relief of having fixed the handrail was replaced by a paralyzing anxiety. He hadn't solved the main problem, just a distraction. The real danger had remained there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for the right moment. Fate didn't care about his attempts to fix things. It only cared about the outcome. Samuel felt an urgency that made him break out in a cold sweat. He needed new boards, different nails, something that could fix the cracked floor. He went down the stairs once more, but with a caution he had never had. He avoided the broken step, taking a wide stride over it. He got in his car and drove to the nearest hardware store, a large, noisy store smelling of wood and paint. As he walked through the aisles, his mind was in a frenzy. He couldn't concentrate on anything. He saw an elderly man in a wheelchair, and he thought about the fragility of life. He saw a small child laughing and running, and he thought about the innocence of those who don't know what can happen. He felt tiny and helpless. Dr. Thorne's premonition wasn't about the stairs. It was about his own inability to see the danger. He bought the materials, got back in the car, and started driving home. On the way, he stopped at a red light. The car radio was playing a cheerful song, but he didn't hear it. He was absorbed in his thoughts, planning every move he would make to fix the step. He had forgotten to look at the traffic around him. When the light turned green, he didn't move. A loud horn startled him, and he stepped on the gas. The horn broke Samuel's trance. He looked to the side at a yellow taxi that passed him, the driver shouting something he couldn't hear. The premonition wasn't just about the stairs. Fate was a game of chess, and he was just a pawn. Samuel got home, parked the car, and went inside. The house was silent. Elaine was still sleeping, which was a good sign. He went up the stairs, this time with the new board in one hand and the tools in the other. He stepped on the broken step, and the wood creaked with a low sound. He was at the top of the stairs, ready to start working. He knelt down and began to remove the old nails. The old wood disintegrated under his hands. He was totally focused on what he was doing, sweat dripping down his forehead. The work seemed to be progressing well. He had outsmarted death once again, and this time permanently, he thought. But fate is a master of irony. As he worked, his attention was so focused on the wood that he didn't see what was beside him. A water bottle, which he had left there to drink while he worked. He reached for the hammer, but knocked the bottle over. The bottle fell, and the sound of water hitting the wood startled him. The sound of the falling bottle made Samuel jump. His muscles, tense with concentration, made him lose his balance. He, still on his knees, felt the weight of his body pulling him to the side. He reached out to support himself, but the handrail, now fixed and secure, was too far to be reached. He felt the air beneath him, the sensation of falling. Thorne's premonition, the vision of the leather boots, the feeling of terror, all became real. The ground beneath him didn't give way, but he fell. Samuel's fall was fast and silent, a blur of light and shadow. Fate didn't need a loose handrail or a broken step. It needed something as trivial as a water bottle. Death didn't come in the way Dr. Thorne had predicted, but the final result was the same. At the moment of the fall, Samuel's reality fragmented. He saw flashes of his life, not as a retrospective, but as old photos in a family album. He saw his wife, her face lit by the sun, her laughter sounding like bells. He saw himself, a small boy, running in the backyard of his house. He saw Dr. Thorne, the worried expression on his face, the pen hovering over the notepad. The sound of the impact was that of something breaking, a dry sound like a branch breaking in winter. Dr. Thorne's voice sounded in his mind, the voice that had warned him, the voice he hadn't heard. The silence that followed was filled with the sound of a doorbell. The phone. In his office, Dr. Thorne looked at the phone. It was ringing. The caller ID showed Elaine's name, Samuel's wife. He hesitated, a shiver running down his spine. The premonition had been so real, so terrifying. He thought he had helped him, that he had given him a chance to escape fate. He picked up the phone, and a voice came from the other side. "Dr. Thorne? It's Elaine. I'm so sorry, but Samuel ... The voice was too distant, muffled, as if coming from a tomb. And Thorne, even before hearing the words, already knew. The premonition wasn't about the form of death, but its inevitability. The narrative of death wasn't about what would happen, but that it would happen. The attempt to escape fate only led to a different path to the same end. Samuel's life, a downward spiral of accidents and attempts to avoid them, ended in the only possible way. On the floor, in the middle of the living room, the empty water bottle beside him. He didn't die on the stairs, but because of them. And the ringing phone, the distant voice, was the only thing that mattered. Death had arrived, and Samuel couldn't hide. Fate cannot be fooled. It only waits. And now, the next story waits, and perhaps it also has a destiny that cannot be avoided.